Hello, my friends, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Wendy. I am with Inspire Ministries, and I am so glad that you have landed on today's video. Today, we are going to be talking about a subject that I am pretty passionate about, and that is marriage. Now, I am going to be following up today on a mini-series that I did here on my channel that is surprisingly one of the most popular ones on my channel, and that is the Godly Wife series, the marriage mini-series that I filmed and uploaded on this channel 2 years ago. I'm going to be talking through something important today that I want you to hear, and then I'm going to invite you to come back to listen next week to a video that I am uploading here on my channel. It is going to be a Q&A all about marriage. Now, if you are a part of our kitchen table page, which is the Facebook page that I run over on Facebook, you will know that about a month and a half or so ago, about 6 to 8 weeks ago, I asked you to ask me questions as it related to my personal marriage and my relationship with my husband. In addition to that, I asked for any questions that you had specifically about marriage, about parenting, or about just running a household, and you came through. You asked me a ton of questions, and yesterday I sat down with one of my assistants, one of my great friends, Chrissy, and she asked me a lot of these questions that you put out on Facebook for me to help to answer for you, and I answered those. But what I want to talk to you today is specifically about something that, yes, we do talk about in that video in great length, but I want to talk to you about something that I thought about today that I really want to share with you, and then I want to give you a little bit of a sampling of what you can get when you tune in next week to the Q&A that I'm going to upload next week. Now, one of the questions that I always get asked, and I feel like this is probably the most common question that I get asked, it's kind of a two-part question. We answered it a couple different times in the Q&A, and I feel like I repeated a lot of what I said, but I really want to drill down this point. And today I read a quote that really got me thinking about what it is that I shared yesterday, and so I want to share that with you today. Now, if you are not married yet, maybe you are only dating, maybe you are only engaged, maybe you don't even have a boyfriend, you don't have a partner, you don't have somebody that you are engaged to, maybe you are single, maybe you enjoy to be single. I don't care what walk of life that you're in or where you find yourself in a particular season, you, I bet, will benefit from this, especially for you new ladies, you ladies who are new to your relationship, or maybe the marriage is brand new, you haven't been married very long. I feel like you can really benefit from what I'm getting ready to tell you today. Now, again, I'm always asked these questions, these two questions. The first one is, how can I encourage my husband? Especially, how can I encourage him in the faith? How can I encourage him to love Jesus more? And how can I just be an encouraging wife? The second one, though, is kind of one that goes along with it, and that is, how can I encourage my husband to be the spiritual leader of our family? And what this really tells me is that there are a lot of women who are either, one, married to unbelievers, or they're married to somebody who they would say is not in the same kind of spiritual place that they are in. And so, I get asked this a lot, and I feel like women have a good heart when they ask this question. I think they're coming from a place of genuinely wanting their husbands to lead their families, wanting their husbands to be the spiritual leader. But sometimes what happens is we, in doing this, try to take control. We try to be the one who is the leader when really he is the one who is called by God to lead his family and lead his family well. And so I want to read you a quote that I read today. And I've read this quote many times. I've heard this quote many times. I'm sure you have too. But it was on a podcast that I was listening to this morning that this commentator said this quote. At least in part, he said this quote, which made me go out, find the quote, and I want to read it to you today. And it says this: Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Now, you might not see on the surface that this has anything to do with marriage, and maybe in and of itself, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with marriage or relationships. But I want to come back to that quote in a minute when I talk through some of these practical things that you can begin doing today in your relationship. If you feel like you struggle as an encourager to your spouse, if you feel like you don't inspire him or encourage him or uplift him or motivate him or just support him well, I believe that you could take a couple things on this list today and begin to implement them in your life. Now, I'm only going to briefly talk about them today because I want to drive you, I want to point you to that video next week that I'm going to upload that is an in-depth look at marriage through this Q&A that Chrissy and I did. But I want to talk through these steps today to give you kind of a teaser for that video and to really have you begin to start thinking about implementing some of these great things. The first one that I would say, if you are wanting to encourage your husband, you want advice on how to encourage him, I would say this. Number one, be a godly example. Now, I think that if we only had one to choose from in all of this list, this would be the one. When we look at what Peter tells us in 1 Peter 3, 1 through 2, we see that what Peter is doing is that Peter is saying that by the way that you wives live a godly life, by the way that you are godly and holy and righteous, the way that you are seeking after Jesus, the way that you are living pure lives, the way that you are demonstrating forgiveness, the way that you are exemplifying what it means to have joy and peace in the midst of hardship, the way that you exhibit self-control. This is the way that you point your husband to Jesus. This is the way that you offer your husband an opportunity for Jesus himself to become real for him. So when we think about wanting him to be the man of the house, to be the great spiritual leader that you have always dreamed and imagined that he may be, then this is where it has to start. He has to see that our faith makes a real difference in our life. He has to see that Jesus has made a mark and that we are living from a higher perspective. We aren't living attached to the world. We are not living in the gutters of life, but we are living pointing to Jesus and living like him. It's one of the things that I'm always saying, being Jesus with skin on. So I think that the greatest contribution that you can make to your marriage, the greatest investment that you can begin to make in your marriage is to love Jesus with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your strength, with all of your mind, with your entire being. And listen, it has to be consistent. It has to be an outward demonstration, and it has to be authentic. And so if your husband can see the way that Christ has made an impact on you, he will want that for himself. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that he will want that for himself, but you will give him a greater chance, a greater opportunity to have what you have by seeing your example. Number two, give him space to work out his own salvation. Listen, I know our temptation is to say, speed it up. We need you to hurry. Like we put him on a timeline and we say, okay, in the next 30 days, you better have your act together. We don't put him on a timeline because God does not work within human time limits and human time constraints. He works on God's time. He works in God's economy. He works by kingdom methods. And so we have to give him space and time to process his faith, to understand what it is that he believes, to get right with the Lord, to pray and ask God to fill him with the Spirit so that he can be the spiritual leader of his family. And so we have to give him space to work out his own salvation. Number 3 is this: support his interests. This is a way that you can encourage him. Support his interests. Listen, I give this great story in our video, in our Q&A video about my husband and I. I don't always share his interests. There are some things that he's interested in that, honest to goodness, I could care less if I ever think about or talk about again. But they're his interests. And because I love him, and because I want to support him, and because I want him to know that I love and support him and respect him and honor him, the very things that men want from their wives, right? I have to speak into those interests. I have to be interested in what he is interested in. Listen, ladies, it's not all about what he can do for you. I know that that's what the world will tell you. I know that the world will tell you it's how he treats you, and it's how he brings you flowers, and it's what he does, and it's what he buys, and it's what he says. But can I tell you, it is a two-way street, and it's not a 50-50 contribution. It is 100% contribution. And so we have to be willing to humble ourselves and be interested genuinely and authentically in what he is genuinely and authentically interested in. Number 4, let him lead. And we're going to talk about this in just a minute, but let him lead, even if it's not at first how you would prefer that he does it. Let him lead. Let's go back to that quote. Weak men create hard times. I want you to think about that before we go to that, because that is the crux of what we're going to be talking about today. But I really want you to hear that it is all about our releasing him to lead, our giving him to the Lord, our surrendering him to the Lord. And say, you know what, Lord, you are going to work on him the way that you're going to work on him in the timing that you are going to work on him in. And it has nothing to do with what I do. It has nothing to do with what I say. It has nothing to do with how much I harp at him or how much I nag at him. But it's all about what you want to do in your timing. So I give him to you. I give him to you. Let him lead. Quit trying to take the reins. Quit trying to take control. Quit trying to be a girl boss. Throw that junk away. That is absolute trash thinking. It's trash thinking. It's not biblical. When we live with this mindset that I am girl boss, that I am woman, hear me roar, when you see those now Kamala Harris shirts that say I'm speaking, how atrocious is that? Like, how disgusting is that we have this mindset that I am woman, hear me roar, that it's what I say, it's what I do, it's how I want to do it, it's in my time frame, it's what I deserve, it's what I want, it has to do with me. That is the most self-centered, sickening, anti-biblical perspective that we could ever maintain in our life. And I say, run from it, flee from it. That is a worldly mindset, and you have to have a biblical mind view, a biblical mindset, a higher perspective if you are going to be successful at being a godly wife. Number 5, I said, say less. Listen, I have this little sticky note, and I know that I've said this a lot of times. I have this little sticky note that's just on my computer. Every single day I look at it. Every single day. It's based on the Bible reference Amos 5:13. You can go and read it for yourself. Say less. Sometimes when we say more, we get ourselves in trouble. I don't know about you. That is true for me. Sometimes when I say too much, I tend to say too much that I knew better. I shouldn't have said it. I knew that I shouldn't have said it, and I said it anyway. And we have to get to this point where saying less is sometimes not only saying more, but it's respectful, it's more God honoring, because we don't allow ourselves to say anything that really might be held against us, that may be misconstrued or misinterpreted, or worse than all of those things, cause us to look less like Jesus. So say less. Number 6, listen. That's practical. Listen to what he has to say. I go into more depth with that in the Q&A. Number 7, don't jump to conclusions. Don't jump to conclusions just because he isn't reading his Bible every day, just because he isn't taking the lead in praying every day at meals or nighttime with you, just because he isn't doing things. Don't jump to conclusions that he is not the man of God that he is called to be. Give him grace. Give him grace. Allow him time to be the person that he has been called by God to be. Give him that grace. And then tell him how proud you are of him. That is a way that you can actively participate in encouraging your husband. Tell him what you are proud of him over. Tell him what you love about him. And when you do that, be specific. And again, I go into more detail with that in the Q&A. Come back for that. And the next question, this is the overarching question that, again, I think I get asked more than just about any other question. And it's this: how do I encourage him to be the spiritual leader of our family? What if he's not saved? What if I'm married to an unbeliever? Well, that's in an entirely different camp. That is an entirely different circumstance, and that is an entirely different video. And I'm not even going to talk about that, but I'm going to talk about for a minute, what if he is not being the spiritual leader that you thought he might be, that you expected that he would be, and that you desire for him to be? Are you ready? I'm going to give you 5 things, and then I'm going to leave our message today with that quote again and talk really briefly about it. How can we encourage our husbands to be the spiritual leaders of our family? Number 1, give him space and permission to lead the way that he wants to lead. Listen, I know you have in your mind, and you likely had in your mind when you first got married, this image of what you thought your marriage was going to look like. You probably had in your mind from the time you were a little girl, many of us did, of this image of this perfect marriage, the 2.5 kids, the golden retriever, the white picket fence, the beautiful house, right? The stay-at-home mom, the homeschool mom. Like, we probably had it all planned out. And even if those were not the things that were included in your dreams and desires, you likely had dreams and desires that you wanted, right? I'm just saying how I looked at it, what I desired for marriage when I was little. And I had an idea when we got married of what I thought that the spiritual leader of our family ought to look like. And wouldn't you know, we'd get married, and it was the complete polar opposite of what I thought it would look like. And I'm not sure why I'm surprised with that. I knew him before we got married. I knew that I at least thought he was a believer. I actually thought he was saved because he believed that I've never hurt anybody. I've never killed anybody. I've never committed any great sin. And so for sure I'm going to heaven when I die. And he didn't realize that until several years into our marriage. But I thought that I was marrying somebody who was a believer, who loved Jesus. And I'm not sure if I thought that things were going to just change overnight when we got married, but I'm telling you, it didn't. And that's the reality for a lot of us, probably most of us who are watching this video. We had an idea, we had an expectation, and can I tell you, expectations kill everything good in our life. I had an expectation of what I wanted my marriage to look, and many of you do too. And that is the hard thing that is difficult for us to wrap our brains around. It's very difficult for us to think about having a spouse that is not behaving the way that we want him to behave. So I would say, give him space, give him permission to lead the way that he wants to lead. And listen, if it is anti-biblical and it is driving you further away from the Lord, and if it is destructive, and if it is abusive, listen, I'm not talking about that. I'm not advocating for that. But I'm saying if you had an image in your mind, let's say of quiet times together, sharing what you're learning in the Word of God together, praying together, going to church together, being in small group together, leading your family in prayer sessions and small group lessons every night together. If that's what your image was, and he is not living up to that expectation, he's not doing those things in the way and the time that you expect him to, let it go. Just let it go and let him lead. I'm going to go back to that one here in a minute, but let's go on. Number 2, and this should be the overarching theme for everything that I've talked about so far, and that is pray. Pray for him. Let him know that you're praying for him. Now, I know, and I say this in the video, that there are some people who get pushback from their husband. Maybe he's not a believer. Maybe he isn't somebody who's following the Lord. And you say, I'm praying for you. And he kicks back with, I don't want your prayers. Listen, you can't do anything about that. You can keep praying, but I would say not tell him about it. But if he does desire to be the spiritual leader, or he does desire to grow in his relationship with God, but it's a very embryonic, at a very embryonic stage right now, listen, feed into that by praying for him. That is the best thing that you can do. And letting him know that you are praying for him, and then asking him, how can I pray for you? Listen, there might be things that he has going on in his life. There might be things that are happening within his life that you don't even know about. Things at work, things in relationships with friends, things with his family members. There might be things that he is dealing with that you know nothing about. So my husband, he doesn't sleep at night a lot. There are nights that I wake up and he is wide awake in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 12. He's up all night long. And part of that is because he can't get his mind to shut off. And a lot of times it isn't really until 4 or 4:30 in the morning that his mind finally goes to sleep and he can get a couple hours before he goes to work. However, he's up in the night and he's worrying. And so I know he's carrying around things. And I know that he is feeling things at a deeper level that I'm feeling them. And I know that he has a burden that he is carrying for our family. He worries about me. He worries about our house. He worries about bills. He worries about his job. He worries about our kids. He worries about the grandkids. He worries about my parents. He has a lot of things on his plate. And so you can begin to feed into looking more like Jesus and loving him more like the Word of God tells us to by supporting him with prayer and then asking him, how can I pray for you? Number 3, this is a big one, ladies, refuse to criticize or critique the manner in which he chooses to lead. And this goes hand in hand with number 1, but I think it's more specific because it talks about criticizing him, condemning him, or critiquing him. And that tends to be what we do. And especially when he's not around. Can I tell you that? How often have I heard women talk about their husbands with other ladies? They get in a group with friends, and one of them says something negative about their husband, and all of a sudden, it's like everybody's bashing on their husbands. I shut that down immediately whenever I hear that. I begin to speak highly of my husband. I begin to speak highly of other people's husbands. I say, he's good to you. He loves you. He treats you well. He is honoring God. I tend to go overboard with trying to support the person who's not in the room. And so be careful that not only do you not criticize him and critique him and condemn him in his presence when you're with him, but also even more when you're not with him. This is something that I believe we have to get better at. Number 4, be Jesus, right? This goes in hand and with what I said, be the godly example, be Jesus. If he asks you a question, point to Jesus. If he asks you for your advice about something, point to the scriptures. Be Jesus. Don't take your Bible and bash him over the head with it. Don't nag. Don't constantly be on him for things that he's not doing right. Don't flaunt your faith, but know the Word of God for yourself so that you can point him to the direction that you want your relationship to go anyway. And then number 5 is don't nag. I just said that. Don't nag. Let him know you love him, you respect him, and that you honor him. Listen, this is the greatest thing that we can do for our husbands. We want love. They want respect. They want to be honored. And do you know that the way that we honor the Lord and glorify the Lord best is by loving our husbands in our relationship, because that is the secondary relationship outside of Christ, right? So let's go back to that quote really quick. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. And weak men create hard times. The question that I want to ask you today is this: are you causing your husband to be weak by usurping your power? I should say by usurping power, by taking the reins, by trying to lead your family, by being the girl boss, by demanding your rights, by letting him know that he's not doing it right, by critiquing him, by criticizing him, by condemning him, by belittling him in front of other people, by having expectations that you haven't even clearly communicated to him of what your marriage ought to look like. You are making him weak. You are causing him to feel weak. And listen, I learned this a long time ago in my relationship with Trevor, my husband. I learned this a long time ago, where we would be in an argument about something. It would be a heated argument about some nonsensical thing. It wouldn't matter, right? Just some thing. And we would be in a heated conversation about it. And he would say to me, I want to leave this and come back to it later on. Me, on the other hand, I wanted to go at it. I wanted to keep going at it because I was angry, I was mad, and I didn't want to pretend that I wasn't mad, because that's not me, right? I didn't want to pretend that everything was fine. I didn't want what we were discussing to fade into the sunset because I wanted a resolution. And he was the more wise one. He always is the wiser one. But he would say, no, I don't want to discuss this right now. No, I don't want to discuss this right now. But Wendy would keep pushing the buttons, and I would keep at it, and I would keep grinding, I would keep poking, I would keep prodding, I would keep nagging until finally he would explode. Or finally he would say something that he didn't mean. Or finally he would say something that would hurt me so badly, but I had been the one to push him to that edge. And the truth of the matter of what I was doing in that moment, in those moments, and I didn't even realize I was doing it, is I was weakening his power. I was weakening his strength. I wasn't allowing him to be the man of God that he wanted to be and that he needed to be. And he was trying to do that. He was trying to lead well by saying, Wendy, listen, we're not going to argue in front of our daughter, and we're not going to continue this conversation until both of us have had a moment to calm down. And yet, what did I do? Kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And so I learned that early on, that what I was doing is I was actually making him weak. And when we try to take that power away, when we try to take that responsibility, is a better word, away from him, when we are trying to exercise power over him that was not rightly given to us by God, because we are to be the submissive partner, then we make him weak. And just like this quote says, weak men create hard times. And so I ask you, what kind of man do you want to lead? What kind of man do you want to lead your home? What kind of man do you want to pray for you? And do you want him to defend you? What kind of man do you want to protect you? What kind of man do you want that stands up for you, that protects you, that defends you, that loves you, that honors you, that loves spending time with you? That is the man that you might be praying for, and yet doing the opposite to try to win him to that position. Do you understand what I mean? And so weak men truly create hard times, because all of a sudden they're weak, we're in control, and we were never meant to be the one in control. We were never to be the one in the driver's seat. And listen, I say this all of the time to my husband. Listen, he knows so much that I don't know. He knows more about finances than I know. He knows more about what's going on in the world politically than I know. He knows more about our household management, things like, the washer and the dryer and all of the appliances and the water softener and the air conditioning unit. Like, he knows more about those things than I do. And I'm always telling him this, and we laugh about it. But I'm always saying, listen, if something happens to you, I'm in dire straits. Like, I am up a creek without a paddle. Like, I depend on you. I depend on your strength. I depend on your wisdom. I depend on your guidance. And letting him know that, ladies, just letting him in on how much I depend on him and how much I appreciate what he does and how much I depend on what he does, not only for our family, but for me and for our house and for even this ministry. Letting him know that makes him strong. And it gives him confidence to stand faithfully and willingly in the position that God has put him in. And so let's not create weak men. Let's honor the strong men in our life, and let's feed into that strength by loving him well, by honoring him well, by encouraging him, by strengthening him, by being Jesus with skin on for him, by living godly, pure, righteous, holy lives set apart for the Lord, and see what the Lord will do in our marriage, in our relationships. See what the Lord will do. Friend, I hope that you have liked this video. Again, I'm going to be uploading the Q&A that my friend Chrissy and I did, that we filmed just yesterday. I'm going to be uploading it next week, so be on the lookout for that. You do not want to miss that, as I'm going to put this as part of our Godly Wife series. If you have liked this video, friend, I would ask that you just do a couple favors for me. Would you just give me a huge thumbs up first and foremost? This pushes this video out. This puts me into this specific algorithm so that this video gets pushed out to more people, and more people see this content that can help them also in their marriage. Would you also leave me a comment down below? Let me know, what is your status? Are you married, single? Are you engaged? How many years have you been married? I would love to know that. Also, if you would hit that subscribe button down below, become a member, become a person that is part of this amazing family here on YouTube. And also, don't forget to hit that notification bell to be notified for every time that I upload content just like this one. And between now and my next video, friends, which again is that Q&A, you will not want to miss it. I love you. I am praying for you. Have an awesome, amazing day with Jesus. Bye, friends.